Pay attention. Introducing Longform Season 3. Imagine this. It's January 2022, and I'm headed to a monthly board meeting. We begin, as we do, by going around in a circle and answering a conversation primer question. What's one of your goals for the year? It was, after all, the season of resolutions. As I had gotten busier, I had been reading less and less. I could feel in my body that lacking a reading practice produced negative results. I sensed a correlation with my mental health. By January 2022, I knew it well enough to make a change, and I declared my intentions in the company of trusted friends and colleagues. I was resolved to read more books. Guess what? I did it. Along the way, I noticed that people can be rather sheepish about their reading habits or lack thereof. People seem to think there's a right way to read. They think there's a right way to read a book and that they don't read that way, producing a discouraging effect. Liberate yourself from such notions. Read 4 pages at a time. Skip sections that bore you. Pick up a book and open to a random page. Start in the middle. Read it backward. Read it word by word, or as Anne Lamott might say, read it bird by bird. By fall 2022, I was secure enough in my position back in the reading saddle that I envisioned a program through which others might join me on my journey. What was I reading? Texts like Deep Economy by Bill McKibben and Building a Healthy Economy from the Bottom Up by Anthony Flacavento. You see, my role as the manager of Boundary Waters Connect has me trying to figure out how we, the people of this community, can grow our local economy. You can read more about Boundary Waters Connect perspectives on economic development by clicking the link here. I'm constantly contemplating casual things like, what are our barriers to economic growth? How are we going to connect across our differences? What aspects of our lived experience or the lived experiences of others are we remiss in not addressing or not even acknowledging? How are we going to create the capacity to do the work ahead? Frankly, I'm not capable of answering these questions alone. Add to that my compulsion for sharing reading recommendations. Thus, I developed the long-form reading and discussion group as a way to do my work in a manner that is authentic to me, putting brackets around juicy quotes and in community with folks who opt into the conversation. A group of 15 to 20 participants convened for potluck dinner twice a month for a total of 7 meetings from winter to spring. I hosted 2 seasons, the first in 2023 and then again in 2024. In each, we read and discussed 400 some odd pages, or generally 2 chapters per meeting. The material was presented in the form of a homemade anthology. Anthology. A book or collection of selected writings by various authors, usually in the same literary form, of the same period, or on the same subject. Example, an anthology of modern philosophy. From Greek, collection of poems, or literally gathering of flowers. From anthologos, flower gathering, antho plus logos, an adjective derivative of legain, to gather, recount, say, speak. Longform was a collective, a collection, a collage, a gathering, a bouquet of flowers. When curating the curriculum, I couldn't not include How to Live or A Life of Montaigne in 1 question and 20 attempts at an answer by Sarah Bakewell. For the first time in my life, I held unbridled power to tell others what to read, and I simply had to include this fascinating book about a strangely relatable 16th century French nobleman. Though I didn't quite yet have my thumb on the pulse of why exactly I felt the need to share it. I thought back to what it was like to read the book for the first time. Summer 2019 was full of bright tansies and showy goldenrod and variations of Northwoods yellow, which will forever color the memories of my early days in this foreign feeling place. I was still working my way through the book as lemony summer tones matured into an amber autumn. Through How to Live, I fell in love with Bakewell and with Montaigne, and while I was reading it, I fell in love with Ely. I got to know them together, and now I can't extract them from one another. We know Ely, but who is this mysterious Montaigne? Consider allowing Bakewell to introduce you to Montaigne more completely by watching the linked video. Seriously, I encourage you to watch it. In the video, she refers to Montaigne as a pragmatic philosopher who was hailed as a guide in the art of living. Michel de Montaigne was a wine estate manager, diplomat, philosopher, and author born in 1533. He wrote about all sorts of things: idleness, vanity, how his tastes have changed over the years, his cat, and so on. Montaigne was infinitely curious, chronically questioning, and insistent about looking at things from novel points of view. He was renowned for his relatability. He published 107 lively, revealing pieces, which he called essays or tries, a term which he was the first to use in this way. Essay: a literary form that tries to replicate the activity of a mind, a type of nonfiction compelled by human expression, inquiry, opinion, wonder, and doubt. From Middle French, essai, a test, a trial, an experiment. Or as John D'Agata says in The Lost Origins of the Essay, is the equivalent of a mind in rumination, performing as if improvisationally the reception of new ideas, the discovery of unknowns, the encounter with the other. I find I'm rather fond of the essay form. I'm drawn to it as a reader and as a writer. This explains the prevalence of essays in the aforementioned long-form curriculum, which you can see linked here and here. Proud though I am of how the program went, and pleasurable though it was to create and facilitate, there was an obvious opportunity for improvement. The first 2 seasons lacked adequate editorialization. I'm here to remedy that. Consider this the asynchronous 3rd season of Longform. May it function as an extension and expansion of the group. Through a series of blog posts throughout the year, I will present to you a bouquet, one flower at a time. My goals in doing so are as follows. Encourage more reading. Specifically, I hope readers will engage with, quote, long-form content, which is to say content beyond headlines, beyond social media. Lest you not know where to start or what to read, allow me to make recommendations. Help readers to learn about themselves and about each other through the process of cross-referencing each other's diverse reactions to the same material. I imagine this will also lead to an expansion of our perspectives on economics, community, and more. And finally, prime our community to more fully embrace our shared responsibility to each other and to our economy. There is much thinking to be done in anticipation of strategy development, let alone collective action. So why start with How to Live? It's a difficult question to answer. There are perhaps, as Bakewell suggests, at least 20 answers. I like Bakewell's Montaigne because life can be so tragic, you know? And the acuteness of the tragedy can be so sharp. Tragedy, a lamentable, dreadful, or fatal event or affair, calamity, disaster. A dramatic composition, often in verse, dealing with a serious or somber theme, typically involving a great person destined to experience a downfall or utter destruction, as through a character flaw or conflict with some overpowering force, as fate or an unyielding society. The tragic or mournful or calamitous element of drama, of literature generally, or of life. The tragedy of it all is so real, relatable, and minute. It's evident that Montaigne understood tragedy and life as such. He was alive during a time when his homeland was dominated by an incessant, bloody, miserable civil war, the French Wars of Religion. He was alive in times of immense suffering and strife. But even so, he made a practice of seeking awe. He did this through crafting his essays. As Bakewell puts it, the essays has no great meaning, no point to make, no argument to advance. Indeed, Montaigne usually responded to questions with flurries of further questions and a profusion of anecdotes, often all pointing in different directions and leading to contradictory conclusions. Rather than being the product of some great design or profound point to make, his essays were the product of paying attention. Again, I find this relatable. We are starting with How to Live because I appreciate Montaigne's cavalier attitude about reading and everything else for that matter. This first long-form season 3 assignment functions as an invitation to reframe your relationship with reading, an opportunity for me to make a disclaimer about the potentially chaotic and pointless nature of this whole exercise, and a strategy to ease readers into this conversation. Because it seemed wiser to start with this relatively lighthearted content as opposed to jumping right into pedagogy of the oppressed, ecological economics and political ecology, or pleasure activism. Reading How to Live helped me understand that our perspectives and philosophies have lineages that go back centuries. They are not entirely our own. They have their own ancestry. And the practice of reading philosophical texts that are self-aware of their place in that lineage could even be considered conversing with the ancients. I like this book because Bakewell's writing is strong with voice, and the Montaigne she conveys is full of personality and style. He's not afraid to be his authentic self. And How to Live emphasizes that if we're going to do this work of figuring out how to live, let us do it artfully. At first, I selected chapter 6 as the one to share with you. It invokes contemplation of philosophy. Then I pivoted to chapter 4, thinking it better to invoke contemplation of reading. In the end, however, I've decided that the chapter with which to begin is chapter 2. How to Live? Pay attention. Attention? Actually, yes, I have been contemplating that a lot lately. I've been growing increasingly critical, or at least skeptical, of the use of screens in our, quote, unyielding society. I've been thinking about my attention and how powerfully it has been compelled towards social media and screen-based news consumption in the last few years. Gross. Accordingly, one of my resolutions for the year is less media, more social. I question the wisdom of letting my brain be flooded, ambushed by the opinions of others as presented to me by an algorithm I don't quite understand. They say we really are what we eat. We are what we think. There's a lot of junk out there, she said, with a Cheeto in her hand, admittedly. Proverbially, but admittedly. I sense this is only the beginning of what I'll attempt to say about attention and toward what we direct it, insofar as we have control over that. But for now, I present to you a brief excerpt from How to Live or A Life of Montaigne in One Question and 20 Attempts at an Answer by Sarah Bakewell. I encourage you to do the reading, to take notes, make marginalia, and to contemplate the following questions, some inspired by the book in general and some inspired by the attachment specifically. What was one of your favorite passages? Why? Do you espouse a particular philosophy? How would you describe it? What do you make of the assertion that this kind of reading is conversing with the ancients? Do you have a place where you go to be by yourself, to hide, as Montaigne does in his library, your own listening point? Montaigne wrote essays to help himself guide his attention back to the place where it belongs, here. Do you have a practice for guiding your own attention back to yourself and the present moment? Now, I encourage you to invite a friend to do the same, to do the readings, make the marginalia, answer the questions. May you convene over a hot cup of coffee or a pot of tea. May you exchange answers to these questions. May you learn something new about yourself and your companions. And lastly, may you consider making a comment below as a way to channel the discussion element of the origins of the long form program. I would love to hear from you via the comments, and I look forward to responding and engaging in kind. And lastly, P.S. While I'm sharing excerpts, I certainly encourage you to secure physical copies of these books that I will recommend from our local library. Or even better yet, email Jordan to place an order for the books via Paragus Northwoods Company bookstore. My personal opinion is that holding physical copies of books provides the best possible reading experience. Plus, that way you can read more than the little sliver that I've shared here.